Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Special Finance Committee meeting of March 27th, 2025. I acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of the Shano and Sauk First Nations. The District of Metchosin is committed to reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, and we recognize, honor, and respect the presence of Indigenous peoples past, present, and future. Please be sure to have your cell phones turned off during the meeting. Committee, we have an agenda before you. We have a pink to add through in our correspondence section. Is there any other additions or changes? Okay.
Move adoption.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Gray, seconded by Mayor Little. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And public participation. Please note all comments made during public participation will be heard by the Finance Committee and taken into consideration. If you'd like to have a chance at the mic, please step forward, state your name, turn on the little button until the red light comes on. There you are. And there is a timer as well. The green light is go, the yellow light is 30 seconds coming, and red is stop. Go ahead, you have 4 minutes.
I see in the financial plan an allowance for $500,000 has been made for the purchase of a replacement fire truck. With the recent announcements regarding tariffs, such a purchase may be beyond reach for Metchosin. I certainly hope so. For one of the things that bothers me is why government and many non-governmental organizations are being driven to spend and upgrade to satisfy underwriter and insurance companies. And incredibly insidious results of these imposed mandate standards, often without any justification other than that they cover somebody else's insurance or organizational standards and requests for perfection. Many of these insurance and best practice programs may be fine for municipalities with the resources to adopt and follow them. But the one-size-fits-all practice approach presents a huge problem for the lesser endowed. Hence, we see Saanich, I believe it was Saanich, giving away a perfectly good fire truck in the last couple of weeks to a community that needs one, but clearly is not even attempting to follow the insurance and underwriter specifications. Liability is often thrown back as a default reaction when you ask to respond to why we are following some of the insurance guidelines. But I do wonder how serious the liability issue is. When was the last time that any fire department anywhere suffered a liability issue based on the use of an older fire truck that no longer met the requirements of the insurance industry? I have a couple other just quick points in the text that was given us. What is this about an operations officer in the fire department? And when the union negotiations are completed, how will that big sum, including retroactive payments, be handled by the budget? Thank you very much.
Nicole Shukin, the Bond Road resident. Sorry, I just took a cough drop, so I just have to swallow that. But yeah, I submitted a letter to this committee, and so I don't want to go over that, but I did in that letter just reflect a little bit on the remarkable history and spirit of Metchosin's public trail network, and suggested that it's the last thing that should be targeted by or for austerity. And I use the word austerity instead of affordability, because to my mind, affordability rests on an actual economic rationale for not publicly investing in a good trail network or active transportation infrastructure, whereas austerity is a political agenda, and it's a choice or a decision to not spend on certain community goods or assets. So yeah, I just hope that the committee will look at this remarkable public trail network through the lens of climate rather than austerity. And I suggest that the priority actions in the Climate Action Plan, which include improving the active transportation network, could be a really good lens to look through. But just for now, I want to talk to two different budgetary matters that also pertain to the Climate Action Plan and priorities. And the first has to do with the hefty $800,000 surplus that Council will be discussing this afternoon. And putting this big surplus back into general reserves makes a lot of sense. But I think that there might be a case for putting a portion of the surplus into one reserve in particular, and that is the Parkland Acquisition Fund. And again, I think the rationale for this comes in our Climate Action Plan, which states as a priority action, if I can quote, may not be able to quote, but it does in fact identify land acquisition for habitat protection as a priority action. And currently, the Parkland Acquisition Fund is one of the lowest or the smallest reserves that we have. I think there's only $200,000 or so dollars in that fund, whereas most of our other reserves, as Mr. Creek's excellent overview of the reserve balances show, are really healthy. So I would love to see that acquisition fund topped up to $500,000. In our South Vancouver Island real estate market, there's no way you can do anything with $200,000. But if we grew that fund, we could actually make a difference. And then the last point I wanted to make was just around a much smaller budgetary item. And it appeared on a budget line way back under recreation. And it involves the allocation of $5,000 to the community hall, to Metchosin Community Hall. And as you can tell from my letter, I am a huge supporter of public investment in common goods. And I think the community hall is an amazing asset. So I support tax dollars going towards the hall. But one thing I wonder is whether it might make sense to earmark those tax dollars for supporting the hall towards energy transition or energy retrofitting so that it can get off diesel heating and onto a heat pump. So I don't know if that's a possibility or not, but it would sure help the owners of the hall and would also align with our climate action plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Patty Williams, Park Drive. I want to thank our CFO for the overview of our reserve balances, as well as for attaching the reserves and surplus policy to the staff report. It was really helpful for me to understand the funding and how it can be used in our community. I think everyone should read this policy and understand the process and allocation of these funds. At the February 11th meeting, the Finance Committee approved funding for the Duke Road East Trail and for the Parks and Trails Master Plan. Both projects received funding from the Gas Tax Reserve, which is now called the Community Building Fund, which is a renewable fund provided annually by the province and meets the active transportation criteria. I also want to thank all of you for the wonderful opportunity to come to the open house and get a better understanding of where tax dollars are spent. It was really interesting to me to see the pie chart where 3 times the amount of our tax dollars go to BC Transit versus hospitals. I was stunned to see that. And I think we should be asking for better bus service. I had originally written down we're an aging population, but I gotta speak just for myself. I'm getting old. I would love to be able to take transit from our community to other places. And I realize that active transportation is defined as human-powered, but why not address this option in our active transportation project that is being done by Urban Systems? Thank you.
Hi, Beth Bacon. I'm a chosen resident. I'm just a real big advocate of trails, so I wanted to talk about roadside trails in particular and the use of the active transportation funding for that. It seems to be, with some people, a confusion about if we make these trails, it's going to increase our taxes. And I'd just like Council to clarify as much as you can that that's not a connection, that's not a correct connection, that we have funding from elsewhere for active transportation and it's not raising the taxes. I have a long history with advocating for trails as an equestrian And a lot of our trails were made by volunteers. And we still, and you know, for example, Machosen Park, no machines went in there. The horse people did that, and they dragged the culvert in by horse. We still have access to fantastic volunteers who can both do planning and physical work, and donate time with machinery when machinery is needed. So the financial thing, I'd like that out of the equation, and then let's see what boxes we check for having roadside trails. We've got health and fitness. We've got safety. We've got reduced vehicle use. That's part of our climate action plan. We've got our contribution to our neighbors. If we're going to stay rural, we're providing them with recreation space. And that's an obligation that I think we have to accommodate the people with higher density neighborhoods. People were saying the cost of living is top of mind for them. If they can walk or cycle to do their errands or go to work, they're saving money, and that's going to be appreciated by all. So I'm talking here more about roadside trails because I think that's what fits best with the active transportation. I would go on and on about the other interior trails. And gee, I'd almost given up on saying, why don't we have anything in our land acquisition budget, until Nicole brought it up. I talked about that for years and years and years, and that fund never grew. And here, I think you're all in support of us getting a corridor for biodiversity. And what's our contribution? We get something from the province. We may get federal money. We may get money from nonprofits. But I think Machosen should have something to kick in as well. So I would strongly support the idea of growing that fund. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Gary Lamb, 860 Hackmore Drive. What I wanted to speak to is the budget figures, having gone through the 2024 to 2029 budget, and then the actual to budget for 2024, and then carrying that over to the 25-29 budget. There appears to be some areas where the numbers are soft. And by that I mean they don't provide a clear picture of what they in fact entail. And just one other point is the reserves. There's a range that's outlined in the documentation on the reserves, a minimum level of 2.9 million to an optimum level of 10.1 million, which gives a difference of $7.2 million, which is a big number. So it raises the question, well, what is it that we feel we need? Because we've said a minimum requirement is a 2, but yet we say the optimum is 10. And then the other thing, and you know, in regards to previous speakers, I think it's going to be imperative upon ultimately council to decide what the priorities are given our limited tax base in the chosen. You know, there's a number of things that are on the books or pending: the fire hall, road maintenance, school. We have the Lombard site that has to be ultimately determined how we move forward with that. Duke Road East, Village Center, Fletch Road Bridge, all of those things ultimately will require money depending on what decision council makes. So that being said, it's going to be critical that there be sufficient information for people to clearly understand how it is that council feels that they will move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm Allison Leduc. I'm a chosen resident, and I wasn't intending to speak today, but I would speak in favor of, if you're going to be putting money into reserves, the parkland acquisition. I just see from my work with the Bilston group, we are losing biodiversity, and we're just losing ground all the time. And so even though it's something that I think everybody probably supports, maybe in the future, I feel like we're running out of time. So if we can put money in and acquire anything like for the Bilston corridor, work with the Machosen Foundation, that sort of thing, I would sure support that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council, fellow residents. Darren Brown, Graceland. I want to speak today about the importance of fiscal responsibility, community values, and transparency, especially as it relates to the use of our limited funds like the gas tax, now known as the Canada Community Building Fund. So there's only one taxpayer. Thought through a little illustration of how I can describe that to you, right? So I pay out of municipal taxes out of this pocket, federal taxes out of this pocket, and provincial taxes, oh, I do have one more, out of this pocket back here. There is one taxpayer. Let's not pretend there's three or more. It's all of us. And every time we spend from a finite fund like the gas tax, we're making a choice that affects what we can no longer afford somewhere else. Those dollars don't replenish on demand, and they were never meant to be a bottomless well for pet projects. They were designed for core infrastructure, things like clean water, wastewater system, roads, disaster mitigation, fire hall, not just beautification or trail expansions. Now, I respect that everyone is entitled to their opinion. In fact, I deeply value a diversity of opinion, but I do think it's important for the public to know that the letter submitted by Nicole Shukin in our supplemental agenda today was written by the spouse of Councillor Shukin, who is the liaison to the Parks and Trails Committee.
Can I point of order for a
Now,
second?
why does that matter?
Mr.
Because
Brown
the
is
committee has brought
Excuse me,
forward.
Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown is making an accusation of something that is unsubstantiated. I'm sorry. I can't let that go right now.
What's the accusation?
It's
That you're not
absolutely
married?
wrong.
Apologies if you're not.
It's absolutely wrong that I had written that letter. So
I did not say that. I said it was written by the spouse of Councillor Shukin, who is the liaison to the Parks and Trails Committee.
I think the exact words were written by Councillor Shukin. If I'm okay? Oh, I'm sorry. You know, I missed hearing the word spouse. It was not written by me, but thank you very much.
Now, why does that matter?
Mr. Brown, can you just focus on the issue and?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to explain
Thank
why
you.
that matters. Because the committee has brought forward some very spendy ideas, increasing their budget by a staggering 50%. And while some of these might be well-intentioned, we have to ask, is it fair or fiscally responsible to push forward significant funding towards one area, like phase 1 of phase 3 of Duke Road East Trail, while other critical infrastructure is left wanting? This is not about personal attacks. This is about good governance. When someone closely connected to a councillor makes a public appeal that supports that councillor's portfolio, we must at least acknowledge it. At least acknowledge the optics, if not the conflict, because transparency actually matters. And let's be honest, fiscal responsibility isn't about saying no to everything. It's about making choices that align with the broad community needs, not just the loudest voices, that the most politically connected ones. So we need to prioritize infrastructure that serves the greatest number of people. It includes roads, communications, clean water, the basics. And I say this with full respect to our parks and trail system, which I love. But they are not more important than keeping the lights on, the roads safe, or our old school water-based water systems functional. So let's remember that spending is not neutral. Every dollar spent on one thing is a dollar that's not available for another. And the only people footing the bill are us, the taxpayers, the residents. So I urge this council and this finance committee to be cautious, to be fair, and to resist the pull of single interest priorities that don't reflect the whole of Metchosen's needs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown.
Thank you.
Councillor Donaldson. I will
Yes.
apologize again for interrupting Mr. Brown and this table. I didn't hear the word spouse, so apologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shukin.
May I speak again, since I was implicated in
Has
Brown's?
everyone else had a chance to speak for the first time? Because now is the time, and then Ms. Shukin can speak the second time. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, no, I also heard Mr. Brown say written by the spouse, so that was accurate. However, that doesn't make it any less problematic. Spouses of council members are also independent citizens. Because one is married does not mean one is wedded in the head, and we should not be disenfranchised, spouses of elected representatives, from exercising our rights as citizens and our ability to speak. That would be medieval thinking, frankly, where married women aren't allowed to speak because a spouse is on council. I also want to just touch on what Mr. Brown said about there being one taxpayer. I also think that's a real simplification of the tax system, because when we pay money from this pocket into provincial taxes, when we win that money back through a fund like Councillor Epp was awarded, we're winning back the tax dollars we spent so that they can be used for the benefit of our community. So rather than that being a loss, I see that as a gain, where we've in fact won back provincial tax dollars to serve Metchosen. Also, those tax dollars are distributed across a huge population. So when we pay into provincial taxes, it's very different than when we pay our local taxes. When we win money back from the province, we're winning money back from the entire population of BC that pays into provincial taxes. Ditto with federal money. So I think it is a real simplistic way of thinking to say that there's only one taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Turn my mic on. We'll go on to the next part of our agenda.
Do we all get a chance to do 2 speeches? No, that's fine. Thanks. Thank you.
The next part of our agenda is reports. On page 3, this is a staff report on
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Through the chair, I'll start off by saying thank you for all the kind words, everybody, throughout all the meetings. I didn't do that first number of times. People have thanked me for the work done, but I do appreciate it. No, nothing. Oh, how about now? All right. Sorry about that. Thank you for all the kind words throughout this process. It does give me a little more energy and support me in standing up here and blabbing on about numbers. So in regards to reserves, I'm not going to go into the detail of each individual one. There's a little blurb in regards to each reserve and where it's sitting. Just kind of cover off to the end part, the recommendations, indicating that staff would recommend that we increase the admin computer reserve to an optimal level of $50,000. This would be enough to cover a future server purchase. So we've got a new one coming in next week, but a decade from now, we'll need another one eventually. So if we start putting a little bit of money away, we'll have enough in 10 years to acquire a new one, or whatever the heck they have invented by then. And then also increasing the legal insurance and consulting reserve to an optimal level of $250,000. When I was reviewing that policy that we have on place right now, it didn't seem like the $150,000 would cover off all of the contingencies that were indicated on there, like the 2 court cases, insurance premiums, and like on the other one, I think 4 consulting contracts. It didn't seem like that would be sufficient, so I'm recommending to increase that to 250. And then below that, recommending the allocation of the surplus from the 2024 fiscal year into general capital, municipal equipment, using the admin staffing as indicated in last year's reserve report, adding some to the fire equipment, building replacement, snow and storm, public works efficiency, planning, environment, and election. Any questions in regards to that?
Committee, do you have any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Schuken.
Through you, Councillor Donaldson. Sorry, just for clarification, the amounts that you mentioned to the computer reserve and then legal insurance and consulting, they are distinct from the amounts in the table under item 3.
Correct.
So that money for admin and legal insurance consulting, that's coming from where?
Well, that'll come from future
Okay,
surplus,
I'm sorry.
or whatever to allocate. Like I'm not saying bump it all up now and apply money to it. I'm just saying we should set an optimal level now, and then over the next 5-10 years, we'll just add a little bit to them. If there's surplus or available.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, Councillor Gray.
Thanks, Councillor Donaldson, through the chair. Mr. Creek, I was wondering about, you picked those couple of reserves. We heard from Gary Lamb just now about this issue. The spread is quite amazing on some of them. And I'm wondering if also whether or not some of the other reserves might increase due to inflation, the economy, and other things like that. Is that something for today, or will we pick that up another day?
Through the chair, yeah, when Mr. Lamb brought that up, well, that's probably a good idea. We could take a dive into actually setting minimum amounts for a number of reserves. You can see that there's absolutely nothing indicating that the minimum would be 0, which is probably not the smartest way to handle it. But at the end of the day, if we needed something, it would end up coming from the general capital reserve in order to finish up whatever project that we do have. But I can certainly take a further look into that and come back with a revised optimal number and minimum level for each reserve.
Thanks, through the chair. I think that would be a helpful exercise, simply to get fresh eyes on the package as a whole, actually. And I would appreciate that, Mr. Creek. The other question I had, we heard a few people referring to the Parkland Acquisition Reserve. And am I correct in saying that that's built in a certain way, but the surpluses can't necessarily be applied to it?
So through the chair, it's not that we can't apply money to it. It's just been the policy of the district previously to only apply money to that reserve by selling parkland or getting funds directly from the province for that reserve. There's nothing that prevents council from indicating, hey, we should throw some money in there to actually increase it, because as she indicated, and you see, it's like all we're doing is earning interest on it, and so it's increasing at a pretty slow clip, and that's going to slow down for 2025 certainly. But there's nothing stopping you from allocating money to it.
So through the chair, is that a written policy, or is it something that's been done on the fly?
Through the chair, it's basically, it's a written policy that you would only take money from parkland sales, but there's nothing saying it prevents you from allocating a surplus to it.
Thank you.
Councillor Schuken.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson, through you to Mr. Creek. Thank you. Another question on the Parkland Reserve, Parkland Acquisition Reserve. If there was an opportunity that came our way, is there anything preventing us from possibly pulling money from the general capital reserve in the future and putting it into the Parkland Acquisition Reserve, or using those funds for an acquisition if we decide?
Through the chair. Oh, you could certainly do that. You just have to pass a motion here.
Gotcha.
If you want to move money from the general capital reserve into the Parkland Acquisition Reserve.
Okay. And, you know, speaking personally, I don't think I'm in favor of adding more money to the Parkland Reserve at this time. One of the big reasons is we are going through the Parks and Trails Master Plan, and I think we are going to be touching on some of the parcels in Metchosin that the district owns, but are not as yet used for park purposes. And there may be opportunities there to bump up the fund. But more than anything, I think we have to have a line toward an actual project. So, but as one of the speakers mentioned earlier, that the fund isn't really at a level right now that we can act on. But getting it there, I think we probably have need a little bit more rigor and process before we kind of bump it up and hopefully bump it up with purpose. So,
Yeah, good
that
point.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Creek.
I don't have much else to say, so if we have other questions.
Yeah, just a different question. Of course, we're all aware that the steering committee and our staff are working on the fire hall question, whether or not replacement's needed or fixing it up or whatever. And I wondered, what reserve would that come out of? The building replacement reserve and or the general capital reserve if we were to proceed?
Through the chair. So yeah, it would start with the building replacement reserve, and then you could end up using money from that growing communities fund that the province gave to the district last year. That money does have to be used within the next 4 years now, or actually, I think we're down to 3. Has to be used by 2028, and then you could also end up using general capital reserve. Maybe.
Thank you.
Through you, Councillor Donaldson. Mr. McPherson earlier mentioned the possibility of a new purchase of a fire truck next year. And interesting comments about, the insurance demands, and I'm not at all too insightful on those. But the one thing that I believe we've encountered in the past is the fact that we strike semi-early with equipment we know we will need in the future. Allows us to actually realize some savings, because as we know and as we've seen with this district, the longer you put things off, the more expensive they are to become. Seen that with Certain Bridge. Fire hall is going to be a big example here. But I just wonder if I could ask you, Mr. Creek, do you have any insights into that?
So through the chair, no, you're right on that regard, in that pretty much anything that we're going to need in 3 years. It's like if you wanted to buy it now, you are going to be saving a decent amount of money on it. We just don't know exactly how much, but everything is just going to keep getting more expensive, especially in relation to automobiles, vehicles, that type of thing. There might be some savings if the next administration in the U.S. removes the tariffs. That's debatable. Like last time President Trump was in there, he set tariffs on a number of countries, and then when President Biden showed up, he didn't remove any of them, and they just kept going. And now Mr. Trump's back, and he's doubling up, tripling up on everything. So whether or not anybody removes them, I have no idea. But certainly, I would bet you dollars to donuts that yes, it's going to be more expensive in the future. I've been looking into some other financing options for these types of things too, so that we don't actually have to pay like the $500,000 up front. We'd end up with a operating lease in order to acquire the equipment now. We pay for a little bit every month, every year, so then we get to save and invest the $500,000, pay $30,000-$40,000 in the first year. We still earn interest. We still get the use of the vehicle without having to deal with the ramifications of inflation catching up after 3-5 years. So it's certainly something we can think about, and I'll talk about once I get more information from company I'm working with.
Councillor Gray.
Yeah, through the chair then, again, Mr. Creek, I wondered if we might just talk a little bit about the fire hall question. We've got the building replacement reserve on hand, and I think you're suggesting that we put $200,000 in there, so that would lift that reserve to $3.87 million. If that doesn't do it, then we turn to Growing Communities Fund, which has a couple of million, looks like. Presently, it's at 2.66 million. And then the general capital reserve. So there might or might not be the funds we need for a fire hall, combining all those reserves, depending on the ultimate cost. I don't know if we have any ideas at the moment of what the cost of a new building might be. We've also got your report to us talking about how we're short on money to replace our assets. So we've got a big, potentially, if things go in the direction some are thinking, about the big fire hall project. Then we're short, I think your report said we're short $672,000 to replace our assets that need repairing, or when they need replacing rather. And you gave us two options. One was when the time comes, we go into debt, we reduce services, and then the other option was reduce services, take on debt, and then the other option was that we put some money aside each year to build up our reserves because we're short. And I think that was a good report that you gave to us, combined with your other report on future costs and taxations, which has given quite a fright to a lot of people about the ongoing costs that we're facing. And so the idea of being prudent with our finances is kind of critical at this juncture. And it's my view that the use of the reserves should be done carefully. We've got that, your proposal here is $300,000 into the general capital, 200 into the building replacement. We also talked previously about adding 1% of the taxes this year in order to build up our new, I guess it'd be a new reserve fund, an asset replacement fund or something like that. So, Council, that's not in our documents at the moment, this additional 1% to get us, set us up correctly. As we know, we're spending money from our reserves at the moment. And so it makes me think that we should be thinking about an additional 1% on our tax bill this year. The alternative to that, if we did take care, going forward, then there's a variety of things that we could cut from our budget. I think we could easily get to get that 1% to make the future look good. We can talk about that maybe when we get to the budget aspect of things. But I want to introduce it now.
Any other comments, committee? Mayor Little.
Yeah, I'd like to speak in favor of adding more to the parkland acquisition reserve. This is not something that we would use this term, maybe not even next term, but it is for the future. But it also signifies and signals that we are serious about conservation and canopied areas for preservation. So I don't want to throw that off the table completely, because I think it signals that this council is interested in conservation in general and interested in helping out future generations towards this.
Okay, good points. Any other comments, Councillor Gray?
I can, through the chair, ask Mr. Creek about the PILT. That's the payment in lieu of taxes we get from the federal government. We've got that, what's called the PILT, or it's called the Revenue Shortfall Reserve. And in the notes you mentioned Mary Hill, but I think we also get PILT for section 95, 25, and 28. And the income there would be lost in the future. And I'm not sure, Mr. Creek, I know you've been looking at all the stuff, and thank you so much for all of the work you're putting in. But I wonder if we've modeled the estimated annual tax increase that we'll expect once we lose that income over different time periods. I don't know the work that was done for the RCMP reserve, but that idea of causing a gentle increase in taxes when we get a big hit, in this case a loss of revenue, I think it might be worthwhile to I don't know that we need to take action today on it, but I would certainly appreciate some idea of what kind of money we've got there and how that might help us in the future. Is that something you might be able to take on?
Through the chair. Yeah, we should be able to do that. That's not a problem. So when I was calculating everything, it was based on Mary Hill land itself and what we were collecting from them, which was I think it was about $148,000 a year, and right now we've in that revenue shortfall reserve, I think it's just under $500,000 or so, which would equate to just over 3 years worth of revenue. So that would be able to spread it over that amount of time. Right now, like projected in that 25 to 29 budget, I'm showing that it starts basically disappears in 2028, and then we're looking at it was about a 5% tax, 5.26% tax increase for that year. Although reviewing the numbers when I was talking to some other CFOs in the area, it's like we had a lower tax increase in the year prior, so it's probably going to smooth that out. Where year before was going to bump up from 2.5 to 3.75, and then make it 3.75 for that year, and then be 3.5 the following year, 2029. But I could come up with a little report for you and show a greater detail for you.
Would that be okay with council if Mr. Creek did that? I think it would help us understand that transition. It's a pretty important one.
Yeah, good point.
Well, then,
Mayor Little?
Just for clarification, through the chair, to our CFO, do we receive PILTs on section 95, 25, and 28? I don't think we do we?
Through the chair, I would have to check all that, find out actually what that land is. Like, nothing striking
think
me
it's
in the
just
head that it would be, but
I think it was just the DND or the former DND lands.
okay.
But I could stand corrected.
Happy to get some more information from Councillor Gray in regards to that land, just to make sure we are collecting it on that, if we aren't.
Councillor Gray?
yeah, that was a question for me too, just to find out and then build from there. I wondered about looking, perhaps I'm jumping from the reserves to the talk later, but we were looking forward to a roads management plan, and I see we've paid somebody for a roads management plan, but we haven't seen it yet here. And we've got a number of things on the schedule for next year. The Happy Valley Road to Leafield Road, I think it's a paving there. The Flesh Road Bridge, possibly the Mill Road culvert replacements the next year. And I'm just wondering what comfort we can have as a council if we approve the proposal without having a plan, whether or not we're covering off the most important road repairs.
So through the chair, I know Chief Payette was arranging that the consultant who made up the asset management report to do a presentation. I'm not too sure exactly what happened to it. I thought we were supposed to be going for that sometime in March here, but basically at the end of it. So I gotta imagine they're gonna be showing up in April to give you greater detail on exactly what was laid out, and then him along with Public Works Supervisor Mr. Watkins will be able to provide greater detail on it. I just kind of ask them, like, how much should we book, and go from there.
That's through the chair. I think that would be helpful to have that information in order that when we approve this financial plan, we actually have the meat behind it to understand it. I guess I'm also looking at the issue of the out years, and they're blank, 2027, 2028. Sorry, page there. There's some money for culvert placeholders. You just said, 50 grand a year, but I'm concerned that the 5-year financial plan be how shall I say, informed by the roads management plan that we get a look at, so that we actually have an idea what's coming, rather than zeros, because I expect there will be money spent every year on roads.
Through the chair, so I put in a placeholder for the roads of $500,000 a year to do going forward. And so with the culverts themselves, like discussing that with the Public Works Supervisor, they were going to work on the culverts that were going to be on the roads that were going to be repaired in the following year. So they're going to do those, get them ready for paving, and then kind of work through that for the next 5 years. But it was more placeholders. I didn't get the actual names of each road for the next 5 years to put into the financial plan itself.
Through the chair, thanks. I see that now. That's the patching, but I guess no money for paving. At any rate, I think that it would be helpful to have that plan before we approve this plan.
Councillor Shukin?
So, thank you, Councillor Johnson, through you. So Councillor Gray is asking for something that's fairly complicated in a way and will probably interfere with the time, not interfere, but it'll complicate your timelines to get this approved. Do you think that we can have that information and move ahead with the budget on schedule?
Through the chair. Top of my head, I doubt it. No. Unless we have some special meetings come up in April and we actually get that consultant to show up in the next 2 weeks, then I don't see how that would fit.
Our Deputy Corporate Officer has a comment.
Just through the chair, the consultant is scheduled, I believe, for the April 28th meeting. That would not give us enough time to have the bylaws read and adopted.
Okay, thank you.
So I can see Councillor Gray's point to a point, but one thing I just want to clarify though is we have a schedule, a depreciation schedule. We knock basically $1 million off the operating budget and put it into capital for future projects. So there is some flexibility that we have if in terms of building a new road repair, road resurfacing schedule, as I understand it. And I guess my question is that true? Like, do we have some flexibility? Can we move ahead with projects? And if we see that they're not sound or fit within the plan, we can adapt?
Through the chair. Yep. Like, so we know what we're going to be doing in 2025. And then we go through this process every year, thankfully or unthankfully. So all the projects for 26, 27, 28, 29, you'll end up seeing those come this November, December, January to approve those, whether or not you want to do which roads. Just kind of like the first time we brought these roads up for 2025 was there's a list of, I think, 6 of them, and we're like, okay, we don't need to do this one, we don't need to do that one, let's put that one off for a year, put that one off for a year. You'll be able to do that fully for 26, 27, 28, 29. But we should really push forward with, okay, we know what we're doing for 2025. That one's set. The next 4 years, totally understandable. You want to know exactly what's going to be going into it. But we've got some placeholders for the funding. There is money available for those projects, either through gas tax. Our road reserve is quite adequate to fill in these minor projects of $3.8 million. So we've got plenty of money to do whatever does come up in the short term.
Good, thank you for that. And fortunately, we do have some historical data to fall back on as well. As much as we're trying to get away from, that schedule, it still is history that is useful. And with the report coming up in the next month, that will all help us go forward. So thank you for that. Okay, so any other questions on this part of the budget? Okay, so the recommendation is that the committee receive the report of 2024 reserve balances for information, and that the committee recommend to council that the optimum levels of the following reserves be changed as follows, and they're listed here, and that the following amounts be transferred to or from the specific reserves as stated in the chart below. Okay, no?
I would move those recommendations.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Ebb. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. All right, so we'll go to page 19, staff report on the 2025 to 2029 draft 5-year financial plan. And Mr. Creek, if you could present that for us now.
Thank you. Through the chair. Okay, so this is the 2025 to 2029 draft financial plan. After our meeting on February 11th, there's a few more items that came up and need to be changed. Part of those, Forest BC Hydro, both set what their rates increases were going to be for 2025. BC Hydro also added in 2026. And then, because of the carbon tax being eliminated on April 1st, I adjusted the fuel costs for the Public Works Department and the Fire Department. Didn't save us a whole lot of money, but just a little bit. And then, also since then, I guess based on what happened at the February 11th meeting, so the ECOM 911 costs, council was good to say, let's use the reserve money that we saved in 2024, apply that against the next 5 years of ECOM costs, so $60,000 a year. We increased the budget for the youth parliament by $1,000 to support 2 youth attendees, and then the Duke Road East Trail, Parks and Trail Master Plan, both help with funding from the gas tax reserve. The school capital budget, we increased that for $5,000 to replace the accessibility door kind of near the front. It's a bit malfunctioning right now. And then public works staffing was approved for an additional full-time employee. We also received new 1% utility revenue projections from BC Hydro, so that increased there to help us out a little bit more. And then I had a bit of a payroll correction based on the wage that was being paid to the operations officer, and so that ended up increasing that budget a little bit. Overall, with all of those impacts being taken place, the total increase in taxes for the average residential taxpayer in Chosen is estimated to be $56.29 a year. That might change slightly when we get the final numbers from BC Assessment on Monday, but it shouldn't be too big of a change. Now that does not include anybody else, like BC Transit or CRD or the hospital or the school or anybody else, but just the cost for us, it'll be $56.29. So it's about, the average resident paid about $1,500 last year, $1,540, and we're just under $1,600 in 2025. So any questions in regard to this?
Councillor Gray.
Through the chair, Mr. Creek, what would that end up being then? And, you know, folks are interested in the percentages. So the municipal tax without police and ECOM, do you have a number for that?
Through the chair, without police and ECOM?
Yeah, just.
Oh, I think it was like 2.73 or 2.37. Those two.
The
Like
police
the total
was 2.9, I think. The police was 2.9, I think.
It's a police is 2.9% increase based on the police
of the
rate.
police budget, right?
Like the overall increase
Sure.
is 3.65%. So that's with ECOM, police, and the district all wrapped in.
3.65 is the tax increase for the district.
Correct. So it's like each one of those percentages costs the average residential taxpayer $14.33. So if you take that 3.65 times by $14.33, should come up to about $56.29.
Thank you.
Councillor Shu, can you have a comment?
Yeah, through you. So Mr. Creek, thanks, that's a wonderful number to hear, but I just want to clarify that I thought we had discussed earlier, like the average residential increase was about 5%. And I think maybe that's missing from, is it, that includes, sorry, that number would include ECOM, am I mistaken, or?
Through your, correct. So that 5% that we were talking about before, after doing the final review on everything, putting it in the tax calculator, it's like we got it down to this amount. Okay. My initial calculation wasn't including the non-market growth, which helped lowering that dollar value.
Okay.
So yeah, went from just over 5 to down to 3.65.
Wow. Wow. Sorry. Wow. Thank you.
Councillor Gray.
There's lots more to talk about, but on that point, council made a decision not too long ago to say, let's not do ECOM this year. We better soften the blow because the taxes will be too high. I oppose that, so I can't, I don't think I'm permitted to ask to reconsider that, but I wonder if council would like to reconsider that decision. We were thinking that the tax rate was much higher at the time. If it's 3.65, the point here being that everybody knows the ECOM costs are on us. and we delayed it. If we delay it, then we'll have to. It's just deferring it. It's not making it go away or anything like that. And should we be deferring it if we have such a low tax rate this year? A question for others to think of. But you know, my view on it would be to take it now and deal with it. I'm thinking about the uncertainty out there, how costs are going to be rising, all the troubles that we don't know are going to be happening to us. And my argument previously was, let's get it done. So we've got money in the bank for what might be headed our way.
Councillor Shukin.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. To Councillor Gray's point, yeah, sorry, I shouldn't be too exuberant. The one thing I will say, though, is that we have had sizable increases over the last 2 years. And this is a delight to hear that it's low upon like relative to the last 2 years. I think I want to give significant credit to Mr. Pyatt and Mr. Creek. And I think we should continue with the course ahead, using that reserve to offset E911. This is the kind of thing that sometimes these reserves are used for, is the surprises that come our way. So I'm supportive of maintaining course. So yeah, that's subject to the will of the table, of course. But
Okay, Councillor, do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, I also agree with the plan that we have right now, continuing with that.
Thank you. Mayor Little?
Yeah, I concur. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gray, do you have another comment?
Sure. I wondered, we have some pretty hefty increases in budgets, and I wonder, you know, we didn't have a good look at it, but if we're down that low, that means we've made some cuts. And is there any way to summarize where we've made all the cuts to pay for the increases through the chair? Or is it simply going through the sheets and trying to figure it out?
Through the chair. Cuts. There's definitely some budget surpluses related to public works that got trimmed back, even with the additional public works staff being added in there. And then I would say a good chunk of this is coming from the revenue side. So the way that the PILT was being budgeted for was basically based on what you were collecting back in 2022, rather than what you're collecting in 23 or 24. Well, certainly what we're expecting in 2025. So that helped bring down the tax increase, where rather than just leaving it to a surplus at the end of the year, now we're saying, okay, let's not have a $100,000 surplus coming from PILT. We use that to actually reduce our property taxes for the residents here, rather than just storing it up in another surplus. So the surplus that we saw in 2024, not going to happen unless some unknown thing happens that everybody stops working and we don't have to pay anybody. But going forward, we're not going to see this 800,000 again, because one, the interest rates aren't going to be there. Two, the RCMP charges are going to be increasing. And three, it basically gobbled up the PILT surplus. So those three things combined, it's like over $600,000 of that surplus. So it's by using that, it's like we didn't really cut a whole lot. It was more massaging the revenue to actually get to actuals rather than a low budget.
Thank you. And that's not dissimilar to last year when it was our investments had done so well, and that's what kept our tax rate lower than it would have been otherwise. But I wonder then, just hearing what you're saying, this will be up, the other thing will be up, the third thing will be up. Council, I hope you heard that. So when the PILT, kicks in, we may have a lot of other costs that we'll have to face and have a much higher tax rate. It sounds like.
Councillor Happy had a comment.
Yeah, I think since Mr. Creek arrived, this is the first time the district has had a full-time financial person doing it, and I think I think it's made a lot of difference and just smoothed out things that have been done differently in the past. And given the information that we've had through the budget process, which has been very clear, I think that we just need to go with it, have some faith that Mr. Creek knows what he's doing, and allow this to proceed to the end.
Thank you. And Mayor Little?
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate, through the chair, I appreciate Mr. Creek's vision for the future, because I think this is a more honest way, and this is just in my financial background point of view, I think it's a more honest way of taxing, that taxing for what we need, not taxing, hoping that we'll have a surplus and then we can spend on one-offs. But that always seemed very odd to me, that we were taxing at one level and we knew we were going to have a surplus, and then there were all these requests for one-time expenses. I think it's better to do it this way, and there obviously is areas where it's buffered so that we don't, if we go $1 over tea bags, it's accounted for in the budget. But I think this is a better way of going, and Mr. Creek does have a handle on all of the budget items, and I trust him to manage it and shepherd us through this. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to agree. It's been helpful for our residents to understand as well, and to have the report in real time. So thanks for that work thus far. Councillor Shukin.
Yeah, we'll very much echo what you've just said, Councillor Donaldson, and you, Mayor Little, Councillor Rapp. One little point I just want to raise. We have had correspondence from the Bilston Watershed Habitat Protection Association about their request for $2,100, and I don't want to lose sight of that within this process. And we talked about it before, but I forget where we ended up with it. So, and sorry, minor matter in the bigger scheme of things, but don't want to lose sight of it.
Yeah, I was a bit confused, because in the past I remembered, and maybe Councillor Epp would remember this, we had the Bilston Creek watering or water monitoring as a line item in the past, and I think that we should. It's our creek. It's not just their creek. I think it should be something that we should be providing every year, and so the ask this year is $2,150, right?
Yes, there's a couple of different parts to this. So in the past, there was a monitoring program, and I believe that was funds we actually paid Langford to monitor. That several terms ago stopped. Those boxes, I think, are still in place, but they're not working. They're not in operation. When we had the buffer lands, we also budgeted $20,000 for water quality testing. We've only spent $2,000 of that. I'm not sure where it's in the budget right now for that. And this question came up recently, and I spoke with members of the Bilston Watershed group if they're interested in doing water quality, if we have that built in our budget, that $18,000 from the past. So that's a question to Mr. Creek. And then going forward, so that's water quality. Previously it's not been, it's been water monitoring for flow. So two different things. So certainly not to lose sight of it, especially as we're getting heavier and heavier rains, and there's more construction going on in the land swap properties. Fewer trees daily.
Yeah, so I think just to remind people, on December 5th of 2024, we talked about supporting the Bilston Watershed Habitat Protection Association with $2,150 as a one-time expense, with the recommendation of Mr. Creek, and that was for water quality testing. So I think it may be already accounted for in Mr. Creek's numbers, although we can hear from him. But I'm noticing that today we have a different request, an additional request, and we're giving it at the table for another. Here, someone else showed it out, $22,000 something. Oh no, it's not clear here. It's that the Bilston Watershed Habitat Protection Association would like to put up some stream side identification signs about sensitive habitat, the riparian area, of course. They can contribute $2,250, but I don't know that tells us what they're looking for from us.
Through the chair. So, correct. This sign is an extra ask that they have. Now we have plenty of funding available to do that. Right now there is $6,400 related to environmental planning that we have. The district hasn't used that in 2024 or 2023, and actually the funding from this year in the reserves, we bumped that into the environmental reserve, which now has over $50,000 in it. So I was planning on using that $6,400 this year to help pay for all of these Bilston Creek initiatives. And then the $20,000 that Councillor Donaldson mentioned, yeah, we didn't use all of it, so we rolled over those funds for the next 5 years in order to pay for the monitoring to continue.
Okay, any more comments on this part of it?
So just in summary, we have allocated money for the water testing, it sounds like. Good, okay. And in terms of the signs, it sounds like we could do it, but we're not sure. We could do it, but we're not able to action like a specific proposal right now. Is it?
Would we do that, Mr. Creek?
Through chair, you totally could, because right now there's nothing allocated under that 6,400 as to be what it would be used for. So you can certainly say, yes, we're going to use that funding that we have in the budget right now for the Bilston Creek Watershed.
Yeah. Can I? Well, I'm supportive of the signs and the Watershed Association. I feel like we might be better to get a more specific proposal from them in terms of the actual amount of money that they're looking for. And again, even a plan in terms of where the signs are going to go. I see the map here for sure, but how many and at what date? This has come to us just recently, so I don't want to make. I mean, as supportive as I am, I don't want to make maybe a decision right at the table today. Again, it sounds like, yeah, so.
Okay, so they have indicated that it's 15 signs. It's not necessary that all of them need to be put up in 1 year.
Yeah.
So those are things to think about as well. So we could take this away and have a further discussion about it, Mr. Creek.
Through the chair, thank you. So I was talking to the person that was kind of pushing that initiative, forget her name, apologies, but she was wondering what the telespars would cost. They were quoted a number, but she knew that as a municipal government would probably get a better deal on the telespars to put the signs on. And so when I looked at our last invoice, which was in November for telespar posts, we were paying $197 for the post and the base that goes into it. So we're looking at about $3,000 for the posts, and then another $800 for the signs. So it'd be $3,800. So basically covering 65-70% of the cost with their contribution. So they're looking at another $1,300, $1,500 on the district's part to contribute to that. The posts might have gone up. Not too sure if they're part of the tariff deal because they're steel or aluminum, but
yeah.
Councillor.
I think I'd like to move that we allocate the $6,400 to the Bilston Watershed Habitat Association to be used for creek cleanups, water quality testing, and roadside stream identification signs.
Do we have a seconder? Second by Mayor Little, and discussion. Councillor Schuster.
Yeah, and thanks. You know what, Mr. Creek has reminded me of the partnerships that would be in place between the district and Bilston Watershed. So yeah, I'm willing to support this as well.
Okay, Councillor Gray.
Yeah, just on the math. So we've got 21,150 we talked about for water monitoring, and $1,500 for the signs. So that adds up to $3,650. And now we're talking about committing $6,400. And I'm just not clear why we would do that.
Councillor.
Well, I just feel since we don't have the absolute specifics for everything, I thought if that money is just allocated for that, and then we can, as the prices come in, then it can be used. And if it isn't all used, then it'll just be rolled over to the next year or the next time.
So we work with, excuse me, we work within the funds that we have allocated and no more. So work within a budget. Councillor Shukin.
And the other thing we're working with too should be the plan that has been put forward here today with the signs, and stick within that. So.
Okay. Any other discussion? Councillor Gray?
Just so we're clear, the motion wasn't up to $6,400. It was $6,400. So that's what the vote's about.
Mayor Little.
Councillor Epp, would you mind amending that to up to $6,400? I think that was your intent.
Sure.
Yep. And so that would be
okay.
Seconded by me.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, so the motion's been amended by Councillor Epp and seconded by Mayor Little. And call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Opposed by Councillor Gray. Yeah. There's no other motion?
Yeah, actually, so we just voted on the amendment to the up to, and then now vote on the main motion as amended.
Point of order.
Councillor Gray.
I wonder if we could explain that again. I think the motion was made, an amendment was agreed across the table. We weren't voting on it. Or are we voting on an amendment? Then that should be clear. Sorry, I thought there was a friendly discussion between the mover and seconder.
Okay, so we have an amendment which was to, the motion was spent up to 6,400. Seconded by, correct? Seconded by Mayor Little. Called the question. There was one opposition. Now I go back to the original motion, which is, can you help me out with this, CO Hansen?
If the intent was to amend the motion, then the amendment is voted on first, and then you move to the main motion. However, yeah, you have to decide whether that was an agreed upon amendment, or just if you were just voting on the amendment to the motion and then the main motion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so can you repeat what the main motion is then, please?
So the main motion was that council allocate funding, to recommend that council allocate funding in the amount of $6,400 to the Bilston Watershed Habitat Protection Association for the water quality monitoring and signage. And the amendment was to add the words up to $6,400.
Okay, thank you. Councillor
Maybe we should do the whole thing again. Vote on the amendment.
Okay. So, so the amendment was to budget up to $6,400. Correct? Yeah. Okay.
And I think it was moved by.
It was moved by Councillor Epp, and it was seconded by Mayor Little. We called the question, and everyone was in favor with one opposition, which was Councillor Gray. Correct?
I was voting on a different motion.
The amendment.
No, I was voting on. I thought there was an agreement.
Okay, so
that the motion.
I call the question then on the amendment.
Thank you.
So call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's all in favor. Now we'll go back to the original, and the original motion by Councillor Epp is that we will budget for $6,400, up to $6,400. Second by Mayor Little. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Gray opposes the motion. Thank you. Okay. Next, where are we? Okay, so we've now addressed, have we addressed fully the correspondence we have in the package from Ms. Nielsen? Um, yes? CO Hanson?
Sorry, through the chair. Was you were having discussions on the 5-year financial plan, and so were you going to make that motion the recommended motion, or were you still having discussions? You kind of bounced.
Okay. Committee, is there any more discussion for or questions for CFO Creek on the 5-year plan? Councillor,
I'll move the Finance Committee approve the 2025 to 2029 5-year financial plan as presented, and direct staff to draft the 2025 to 2029 5-year financial plan and 2025 property tax rate bylaws for consideration at the April 7th, 2025 council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconded by Mayor Little. Questions? Councillor Gray?
I had a question through the chair to Mr. Creek. I wondered if the line item to do with, I think it's called Trail Capital, if that involves completing the Weirs Beach stairs. There's $40,000 there.
Through the through the chair. Can you tell me which line you're looking at there? Okay. Keep my bearing straight.
Through the chair, it's in the capital expenditures. It's under the other, about mid-page. Trails capital improvement. That's $10,000 there, and then there's another $40,000 in a different location. I'll find that, or you can.
Through the chair. Yeah, that is under the recreation budget.
Recreation budget.
Where it came in at
well, there it is.
$50,000 for trail development. So that $50,000 includes the $40,000 that is for the Parks and Trails master plan and the Duke Road East study. So then we'd have $10,000 there and $10,000 in the regular capital account to be used towards the Weirs Beach stairs repair.
So Duke Road East is 20, and the master plan is 20.
Correct.
And the Weirs Beach stairs then would be the remaining. Not that we would use it, but
hopefully there's not another 20. Yeah.
And then there's another $10,000 then in capital expenditures. What would that be for?
Under whatever it might be, whatever might come up, and any type of repairs, any expansion. I know Public Works keeps asking for using money to resurface. There's a lot of trails that have been kind of overgrown, that type of thing, and it's now just a pile of mud, so they need money for gravel, etc.
Be sure that we don't lose touch of the Weirs Beach stairs. It may be that the solution at Weirs Beach is to naturalize it and remove some of the things that are there. That might be at least expensive and most fruitful way to go, but having some money available so we could at least complete the one trail we've been working on might be a good idea.
Councillor Shukin.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Gray. As I understand it, there has long been a trails capital amount in there. Also, and I think this is just what it is, maybe put in a different place than in years past, but there's also a $5,000 trails maintenance amount, which I notice has been knocked down by $2,000. My friends on PTAS may be going to be a little bit annoyed by that, but the reality is we have not been using it all that often, mainly because it's more volunteer muscle than anything. So I just again to the question of the 10,000, I think it's the regular amount that we always have. So,
You're quite correct. It's been 10,000 for many, many years. Yeah, and it would go into things like, right now we have identified that Hillman Trail has got ruts because of all the water and stuff. So things like that, maintenance of the trails.
Very good. My question was mostly about the Weirs. Do we have the funds to complete the Weirs Beach Trail? And it looks like it's there. I was anxious that seeing it get picked off with other purposes, we might not have the money, which would be an unfortunate circumstance.
Yes, good question. Thank you. Go ahead.
Maybe I can move along to a different question, which is, I suppose, also a capital one. It's in the discussion here about the Flesh Road Bridge. We've got $142,000 in the budget for that, but council's all seen the numbers. It's quite possibly a lot more expensive than that. The CAO was anxious this happened this year. What do we do if the money's not there? Is it pulled from a reserve somewhere?
Through the chair, correct. It would, if the quotes on that kind of end up coming back significantly higher, well, we were going to come back to council anyway because we got the quotes on it to find out what the final number was actually going to cost. So then we'd actually get approval from everybody here. Anything over 142 would end up coming out of either the general capital or the roads maintenance reserve or the gas tax reserve. Any of those would fit the bill for using the funds.
Thank you.
Mayor Little.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I just had a question about the municipal hall roof replacement. So that's subdivided over 2 years, 115,000 and 120,000 per year. Oh, I see. I just saw it. So one was 2024 and the 2025 is the 120,000.
Through the chair, correct. Yeah. So it unfortunately we couldn't find anybody last year to do it, but we had somebody out here yesterday or the day before actually come in to take a look and see what it's going to cost and what they can do for it. So we should be able to actually get that completed this year, hoping for that budget of 120. We just added a little bit up just because of the extra year, so it had cost.
So I have a question with that, Mr. Creek. Are we also getting quotes on a tin roof, as that's what most of our buildings are? Because I understand that tin roofs, their prices actually come down, although I don't know if the tariff is going to affect any of it right now because we have stock on, in Canada, so who knows? But are we looking at that as an option as well?
Through the chair, good question. I would have to check with Public Works Supervisor and Chief Payette on that one. I don't know exactly what they were looking at and what options they were taking to consider. But okay. I can certainly find out and get back to everybody.
It would be great for us to actually have a comparison of that, especially as we're doing fire smarting and stuff, although I do understand that Geroid is also fire smart material. Thank you. Any other questions, committee, on this? Councillor Gray?
Yeah, I wondered, I saw in the budget an amount of $6,000 for garbage bins in the village core, but I went back to our minutes and we never had a motion about that, so I wonder if that could be taken out of the budget. Through the chair.
We may not have had a motion about that, but we do have sufficient funds within the building reserves. Actually, it's well over the I think even the maximum. And the business community has been asking what's going to happen with the funds that they have been paying into. So do we know if that's where maybe that money's coming from, or is this, like Councillor Gray says, is it going to be in the budget for the taxpayers to pay?
So through the chair, correct. So that was my mistake. I thought when we were discussing that originally, when we were talking about all the other capital projects, that it was approved. Unfortunately, there was no action taken on it. The money would come from the business development reserve, which has over $50,000 in it. So if we remove it, it's not going to save us any money on the taxes or lower anything in that regard. But if you want to move forward with it, we can. If we don't, no harm, no foul on that one.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gray.
Many of our discussions aren't about tax rates, but they're about the spending of the money that we have. This one, I think we talked about it. There's very little garbage in the village core. Anybody can walk over there and take a look. The businesses take care of their end of the deal. I would just suggest it's a spend that we don't, it's not a necessary spend at the moment. And we hashed it out and didn't make a motion the other day on that one. So I was just saying it could come out of the budget and change the numbers a little bit for us.
Mayor Little.
Yeah, we had significant correspondence last year and correspondence this year that there was garbage, but that the business community was picking up the garbage themselves. And so it is clean, probably because of the stakeholders within the village are removing it. I would like to see garbage cans there. I think that would be prudent.
Did you want to make a motion to that effect so that it's affirmative?
I'm sure you have to remind me, was it the 6,000?
It was quotes.
Up to 6,000?
Yeah, I believe at the time it was done, and with some research that our CO had done.
I'll make a motion to spend up to $6,000 on the garbage cans for the village poor.
And to come out of the business reserve.
And to come out of the business reserve.
Okay, do I have a second for that motion?
For discussion.
Okay, thank you. Discussion? Councillor Rapp.
Well, my concern with this is not just getting the garbage cans, it's who's going to look after them. It's picking up the garbage, because we know that if there are going to be garbage cans right out there where everybody can see, considering the amount of junk that's piled up by the metal bin, I think the garbage, they could just become a receptacle for the whole community to just start dumping their garbage. I mean, they even put it beside the Lions box by the former preschool. And so it's, it would be a concern to me. I think it's a good idea. I think if people were responsible, that it would be a great thing to have there. But I really hesitate to, kind of go the route of the dog poop receptacles to do that. I just really don't know whether it's worth spending the money. It is in the business development fund, if that's what they want, whether it's worth, spending that money out of that fund. Do as an experiment to see if it works or not. Maybe that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, and as I recall, when we were discussing this, we had also talked about whether or not we contract a service to actually empty those garbage bins. And I'm not sure what the opening size is, how much garbage can be put in, but as Councillor Epps says, we do know people will leave garbage at the base of it. Some of the problems that we had is not so much the ongoing garbage, it is when there's events. So I'm wondering if maybe we invest then in garbage receptacles that when we have events, the district pulls the events out, or not the events, the receptacles out for the events, so that perhaps the business district isn't having to clean up all those things that people leave behind when we have functions going on in the core. Similarly to what we do with Machosen Day, we set up lots of garbage cans all over the property because we have mass amounts of people that are coming. So maybe this is, I'm not sure, because I don't recall the letters that had come in, if it was just for events or if it's an ongoing concern with garbage. But that's another consideration, that we're still providing a service when we have large amounts of people that come. But again, we need that community calendar to know what events are happening when too. So many different balls in the air. Councillor Gray.
I guess I'm just concerned that this is a solution looking for a problem. You don't see garbage around. Talk to the business owners. They're taking care of it. So the country store takes care of it, the restaurant takes care of it. I'm not sure the correspondence that we've got asking for garbage containers, but maybe it would be good for that to come forward, or us to ask the various business owners rather than jump to this. But I'm, like you, Councillor Donaldson and Councillor Epp, household garbage will be headed that way, and we'll have lots of issues to clean up. But we'll have garbage downtown now. We don't have it now. I don't think we're a big city. I don't think we need some of these things at the moment.
Mayor Little.
Yeah, thank you. The correspondence last year was the owner of the Machosen Business Center, and she said that it wasn't special events, it was at the end of the weekend. she was cleaning up garbage that wasn't related to her businesses that were renting in her space. And I applaud all the business owners, from the school to the cafe and the business center for picking up other garbage that is not their own. But I think it'd be a good service that we could provide as a municipality to the commercial businesses, which are small in Metchosin.
Yes, well, we also know that people deposited their domestic garbage even in the dumpsters behind the fire hall from time to time as well. I've seen it with my own eyes. So, Councillor Shukin.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I have to confess to being nervous about moving ahead with this on two fronts. The first being what we maybe what the potential is for garbage coming our way that isn't there now. Case in point is the metal bin, but also the the cost. Great to have this pulled from reserve, but it's the ongoing operational maintenance costs as well that I'm nervous about. And I know this isn't dog poop per se, but the forecast for dealing with those two receptacles was something in the order of $25,000 annually. So, yeah, I'm quite nervous about. I don't think household garbage is going to be the same thing, but it's another cost that we're going to incur that just right now I don't know if we need to. Yeah, so I'm not in favor of this right now. So.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Okay. Next. Councillor Gray.
I wasn't expecting such a long discussion about that. The other one that I see in the budget I wasn't certain of was the school leasing agent, an increase from $5,000 to $11,500. And I seem to recall that we had otherwise discussed, we hadn't had a motion on it, but we were doing away with the school leasing agent. So I wondered if I could ask Mr. Creek what the $11,500 is for.
Through the chair, thank you. So I actually removed the leasing agent in the first iteration of the budget, and then there was some pushback regarding, well, we're going to need somebody in there, so let's leave the budget amount in so we don't have to come back in 4 or 5 years and add something in. So that's why I put it in there. In this case, going from 5 to 16, what it was, the leasing agent was actually recorded in 2 lines in the school there. There was one under, 1 second. You have a leasing agent under the school contracted services plus the line for leasing agent. So I just chopped off the leasing agent out of the school contracted services and moved it down into one line. So it's contracted services, like rodent disposal, that type of thing. And then the leasing agent's on its own separate line. It was a little confusing when I first found it.
Thanks for the explanation. And I might have been part of the pushback. I was just anxious that we get the place rented in commercial leases. So thank you very much for that explanation. Another one I was curious about was the new or the additional $2,100 to the Peninsula Agricultural Commission. I didn't recall a request for more money from them, and I think the current budget is about $1,500, so it's a big lift, and I didn't know what that was about. Wondered if you might explain through the chair.
Through the chair, there was a bit of a change in that. I'm going to pass that over to the corporate officer. She's got a little bit more detail and knowledge on how that whole thing worked out.
Through the chair. So each year, the members of PAC, which are Central Saanich, North Saanich, Saanich, and Metchosin, pay an annual fee to PAC. I think it might be around $1,000 or $1,200 per municipality. But Saanich has now stepped down from providing support for PAC, and it's going to be rotating between the 4 member municipalities. North Saanich has now taken it on, and they will also be invoicing the other three municipalities for the costs incurred for the administrative support provided to the commission.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, the Deputy Corporate Officer through the chair. I'm wondering if today is not the day to talk about that, but I would appreciate hearing back at some point from our own Agriculture Advisory Select Committee, which is a volunteer group, to find out whether or not we're double paying by having a group in the peninsula working on the same topics. Maybe if we are going to look at terms of reference of the committees, we can compare the two and see what the difference is between the committees. I recognize one involves more people and more places, but it's providing the same service here. And that just brought to attention, I appreciate all the work that various people are doing, but just brought to my attention because of the cost increase of $2,100.
Excuse me, Mayor Little.
Yeah, thank you. So the Peninsula Area Agricultural Commission is focused on advancing agricultural issues within a regional context. So they provided for the workshop that you attended, and Councillor Shukin and Councillor Epp and Councillor Donaldson on the landfilling, dumping of fill in lands that is beyond the capacity of our Agriculture Advisory Select Committee. So they look at more regional issues in supporting agriculture. I guess it is a little bit redundant because they're both talking about advancing agriculture and supporting agriculture, but one is regional and ours is Metchosin. The chair of the PAC right now is Robin Tunnicliffe from Metchosin, but I'm sure she'd be very happy to come back and report on specifically what PAC does. And actually, we actually, as a council, even though we pay the fees of about $1,500 a year, we don't use them very much. So, for instance, our agricultural plan could have gone to them for review and for comment, but any other issues we can always refer to the PAC because they have considerable expertise in all areas of agriculture and in planning.
Yeah, yeah, I had the privilege of attending one of their meetings this past fall, and there's a lot of expertise at the table. Some of the other things that they have done regionally, which may be a little bit an overlap, but actually it's all encompassing as they've been supportive of the newly formed South Island Farmers Institute, which puts on a week-long conference, full-day in-house conference, but one where you get to tour farms and you can sign up for these different things. So an educational component that is open to anyone that's interested in agriculture. In speaking with the chair earlier today, and having been at a workshop on Tuesday where Minister Lana Popham and our new MLA Dana Lejeune, out in Souk. There's a large contingent of farmers in that area, so I propose that perhaps PAC actually consider taking on maybe some membership out of going west of us as well with Souk and the Watershed electoral district. So I'll be talking to our local government partners in that area as well, and certainly PAC is interested in broadening the horizons. So it's unfortunate we've lost one of our partners on the peninsula, but there, as we realize, and more, food security is critical on the island. So there is an interest, and there's a lot of passionate people out there. So support and education, and certainly PAC could liaise, or we could liaise as a council with PAC more, and certainly our agriculture committee could too. So we have a long-standing relationship and yearly membership with them. So they're valuable. So I'll ask and see if we can have the chair come and give us a presentation on that, on their history and all that they do. Bill, do you have a comment?
Yeah, and so PAC has been around for 27 years, and we have not hosted or paid for any of the administrative costs over and above the $1,500. So I think probably they said, well, you know, we've hosted it for so long. How about some of you step up to the plate? And I think that's where the modest increase is.
Okay. Any other comments on the budget?
I'd raised a question previously about the $5,000 for voting machines, and I see the response from staff is related to the notion that we can get some benefit in terms of staff time, or it's difficult to find people to do that kind of work. I just wanted to report, I did hear from one member of the community, Neil West, who's quite opposed to these machines from the thinking that we do a good job of hand counting, the accuracy is there, and some worries about how well these machines work.
Yeah, I believe the concern was the overtime that was required for staff to stay late and making sure that the counting was accurate. And it wasn't just one person counting ballots, there was quite a group of people. And as I recall, it was 2 a.m. when they finally finished. Councillor Shukin.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I don't think it was that late, but it was late. And I'm in support of voting machines. I talked to a number of people who are part of that process, and they describe it as exhausting and tedious. And we have to keep an eye on the number of people who are involved, and again, the quality of the people involved as well. We had a great team at the last vote. But the one thing that's going to happen is if we don't have a good system in place, whether it's the people or the machines, there's a potential of us paying even more if we don't get things right in terms of time lags or legal challenges. So yeah, I'm supportive of maintaining the budget for the voting machines.
And as I recall, Mr. Creek, you were going to check to see if we could do lease as opposed to purchase, considering it's every 4 years, correct?
Through Chair, correct. So it will be lease rather than purchase. And the overall cost increase to the district is going to be about $1,300 because the overtime that we had to pay to our staff along with all the accounting staff. And I don't know, so when I worked in election co-ops, and that thing was, you're trapped inside a building for 14 hours. So like trying to find people gets a little more difficult when you are paying them like not the greatest amount of money in the world, but still it is still costly because they have so many people involved.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I've just been reminded we do have a server update at 6 o'clock tonight. So we need to wrap up our discussion. Do you have some questions?
Yeah, I had some questions about the fire department. I kind of like the trails, which I love and want to meet, and so much appreciate the people working on it. I appreciate the people at the fire department as well, the staff and the volunteers, but I had some money questions. We got to look at a summary of pay expenses from the fire chief, and I noticed that her expectation is that we'll spend $16,000 more than we have in our budget for fire allowances and honoraria, and I wondered how we might manage that. So that's a question through to our CFO. I guess it's really a question for the CAO, but he's not here today. So, Mr. Creek, if you're not able to answer, that's okay. It's just we've got a few questions like this that are maybe for the CAO, but let's proceed anyway.
Thank you. Through the chair. So the way that ends up being covered, it's because of the financial plan and what council approves breaks down into general administration, protective services, that type of thing. The fire department's in protective services, and the extra $17,000 will just reduce the surplus coming from the protective services for the 2025 year. That's how it ended up being covered in the end.
Thank you. So keep it within the departmental budget. Great. And on the firefighter allowances, we had, I think there's 66,300 proposed for firefighter allowance. That was overspent in 2023. Again, it was overspent last year by $10,000. So I wondered if we can confirm that this resulted from an increase in calls and a change in the weekend stipend during the 2024 year from $50 to $100 a shift. And the reason I'm asking is I got one note from one staff saying, oh yeah, that's not in place yet, and so another staff saying, no, those are the current rates, to just get it clear. How did that change during the 2024 year?
Through the chair. So the $100 for the weekend shifts, from what I gather, because in the budget it was all $50 per shift. It seemed like that did occur during 2024, where it increased to $100 per shift for the weekend, and still remained at $50 for the majority of the time on the regular week.
Thank you. Follow-up question then, who other than council, presumably during the budget process, has the authority to authorize increases to stipend rates? Through the chair.
Through the chair. So that basically comes down to the CAO, who would approve what people end up getting paid, and whether or not that will fit inside the budget for protective services or general administration or that type of thing. The hourly rates and that type of thing generally does not come back to council for approval.
Thank you. And so that we made it through because that department made it in within their budget. So this was all a legal and undertaking, that sounds like. This year, we can't reverse that because we have people who are expecting that money. So the decision was made last year, but you can't, can the budget happen without those, the increase in that budget line this year, I guess is my question.
Through the chair. Could you repeat that? I didn't quite understand.
Well, last year we spent $73,000 on this budget item. That's right. Sorry, maybe I may have jumped. Yes. Yeah, I think so. Well, let me just find it here. Well, we're short of time, but just to say, an increase was made last year, mid-year, without council's review, and that was okay because it didn't exceed budget. Now it's coming to us this year because it will exceed the budget, or can we manage with the same numbers this year as we did last year?
Okay, thank you. Through the chair. Yeah, we, based on the number that we had and is projected, it'll still fit within what we end up with, a little bit of a surplus in under protective services. And that number for those officers is still just an estimate based on calls. If there's fewer calls, we won't end up spending that much. If they end up having even more calls, that number will be even higher. So we'll see where we're at mid-year, and then possibly come back to say, hey, we're on track to go way over budget. Then we could come back and say we need a financial plan amendment, just depending on how every other account is looking.
Thank you. That sounds like a good idea. I think last year, Mr. Payette, our CAO, said that we would be getting, was it quarterly reports on how the finances were going because of these ups and downs. And we weren't able to pull it off this year, but that would be a great idea through the chair to Mr. Creek if we did have sort of a regular look to see that we don't overshoot. I had kind of a similar question about the fire prevention officer. It was mentioned by someone in the audience. Who has the authority to authorize a pay rate higher than that rate approved by council? Through the chair.
So through the chair, I believe that would have to come from the CAO. But I could be mistaken on that one. I'll have to confirm.
Thank you.
When they're back.
And then I just had the question of the fire honorariums. Again, I so much appreciate all the work people are doing, but these financial questions need to be sorted in terms of clarity to know. Last year, I understood we'd authorized a change in payments for duty officer hours, and we bought a package. This year, we see a 70% increase in that budget line. And I wondered what the explanation was. I think it has to do with hiring additional people to do the job that we thought last year was covered by the compensation scheme that we had approved. Through the chair.
Through the chair? Correct. So it was they're adding additional officers, or aiming to have additional officers. Recent conversation with the chief showed that that we're going to have an extra one for a little bit, and then we're going to end up losing a few through the year. So that budget amount is unlikely to be met in 2025.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Creek while we have him here? Mayor Little?
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to move that the Finance Committee approve the 2025-2029 five-year financial plan as presented and direct staff to draft the 2025-2029 five-year financial plan and 2025 property tax rate bylaws for consideration at the April 7th, 2025 council meeting.
I already moved that.
Oh, sorry. Did you? Okay. Seconded it? Okay.
And we're having a discussion. Yeah, that's a long time ago. So.
Okay.
So perhaps no, sorry, that almost exceeded my memory to that discussion. So I'll.
Yeah, Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I guess the other question I had, which I posed earlier, was this idea of adding 1% to the budget to start building up our reserves, as recommended by our CFO. There were two choices. In the future, we go in debt, or we put a little bit of money in this year. We can do that in additional to the money we have already on the table in terms of taxes, and or we could decrease some items in our budget to make way for that. And rather than making a motion, I'm just interested if people have any appetite for that. I'm certainly keen on doing it because, well, now it seems the tax rate is much lower than we'd anticipated. But is that okay if we could just ask the group what they're thinking?
Sure. So we're in discussion right now. Councillor Schuken, your thoughts on that?
Councillor Donaldson, I would just call previous question. I think we should vote on the motion.
Yeah, what I'm asking about is not so much voting on the motion, but this will be an amendment to the motion. I can maybe I'll just make the amendment then. Or move the amendment if you'd like. I just was, so I'll make a motion that we add an additional 1% to the tax rate in order to build up our asset replacements reserves.
Motion by Councillor Gray. Do I have a second for that amendment? Okay, there's no seconder. So that doesn't pass. So I'll call the question if there's any other discussion on this motion. I'll call the question then. All in favor? And opposed? Opposed by Councillor Gray. Okay. All right, so we are out of time, so unfortunately we don't have time for public input. So I would like to ask for adjournment. Sorry, go ahead.
We have correspondence, maybe move
yes,
to receive that. And there's nothing about another public participation session, so we are sticking to the agenda. So, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, we're out of time because our servers are going to stop in a minute.
Move receipt of the correspondence from the Bilston Watershed Association.
Yes, and also Ms. Schuken with her letter as well, commenting on our budget today. Okay. So, we have a mover to adjourn and a seconder, Mayor Little. All in favor?
We should do the receipt of correspondence first.
Of course we should.
Yeah.
Okay, so motion to receive the correspondence.
Yeah.
Moved by Councillor Schuken. Second by Mayor Little. All in favor? Carried. And move for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Schuken. Seconded by Mayor Little. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much for your patience.